At this point, I would like to ask our producer panel to come up and take their places on the stage. The voices of government, industry, and experts are needed for an agricultural policy framework. But agricultural policy discussion wouldn't be effective if we didn't hear from farmers directly. We're fortunate to have with us today 3 extraordinary farmers for a panel discussion. And if they could join me on stage now, I'll turn this over to Stuart to manage our panel.
Thanks, Jeremy. My name's Stuart Cheddar, and I am the new policy manager with APAS. I'm going to dive straight into questions to stick to time. So to each of our panelists, and I'll start with Adrian and Trevor and then Chris, in 2 to 3 minutes each, could you introduce yourself and your farm, and can you help us understand the biggest risk or threat that keeps you up at night?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Stuart. I'm Adrian Ivy, farmer at Ituna, Saskatchewan. We have a mixed farm that is a pretty 50-50 balance of grain farming and commercial beef cattle. Trying to think about what the greatest threat I see to our farm right now, when there's so many to consider from different aspects of what we're producing on the farm. So a little bit of background on our operation. We used to be predominantly beef production with a tiny little bit of grain production smattered in. And we have, in the past few years, significantly downsized our beef herd and upsized our grain cattle, or our grain production side. And very unfortunately, I believe that business risk management, and more specifically, the lack of business risk management on the livestock side of things, has been a huge determiner of why we have made that switch. And then you add in some different things like access to labor, knowledge base of labor on the livestock side of things have also contributed to that. But I do believe that income stabilization, like through agri-stability, lack of insurance options on the livestock side, that has been a huge threat to the beef operation on our farm, and why we have chosen for longer term stability to focus more on the grain side.
Thank you. And then to Trevor.
Trevor Green, from Fleming, Saskatchewan. Run a straight beef cattle operation. Our farm, this is our 127th year. So I guess that's what I consider sustainability. Great grandpa and grandpa were both mixed farmers. Dad was a straight grain farmer. So we went the opposite of what Adrian did. We went the other way, transitioned into beef. It was what I knew. At the time, I didn't have a lot of interest in grain farming. I had been in the livestock industry and marketing and feedlots and working on a larger 1,500 cow calf ranch. So that's what I knew. I figured I was going to do what I knew better and hopefully do it better. So that's where we transitioned to. A lot of the programs that we used to move into that was seeding grass down and creating water infrastructure were all government programs that we used to do that. We probably would have been able to do that without them. Biggest risk I see is that, yeah, like it's still the not having the backstop of BRM programs, say a production insurance or some of the changes to ag stability are definitely going to help. A few more that have been proposed would definitely help a lot more. And another one might be still trying to convince my 2 sons that farming's in their blood, and the smell of dirt and the sight of a new calf is better than living in the city. So.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Prosick. I'm from Fillmore, Saskatchewan. My background is maybe slightly different. I grew up in Fillmore on a farm. We had a mixed farm. I was part of the generation that left Saskatchewan in the late 90s, early 2000s. So went out to Alberta and was fortunate enough to work for Ag Canada at the Lethbridge Research Center, and also helped kind of create Farming Smarter, which is a group now that's doing applied research. So in that, then came back and worked for a few grain companies. And then now my wife and I have purchased the farm for my parents, and we run a primarily grain farm, but we're transitioning the other way in some ways. It feels like, I always said we're never going to have cows again, and I think if there's one lesson I could leave you with, never say never, because I'm living proof right now. It started out with having 3 cows for my wife to have as a hobby, and now we're up to 30. And then we're with one of our hired men. We're managing 100 cows in addition to the acres we grain farm. So, I think it's never say never. I think learned a lot along the way. I think the thing that keeps me up at night is people. We're shortage of labor, shortage of support in terms of all the businesses that support around us, whether it's parts, whether it's grain elevators. We're just agriculture is still a people business, and we need lots of support and tech and whatnot. And transitioning some of that knowledge from one generation to the next, whether it's on the farm or whether it's through all the relationships we have. So I think that would be one of the biggest risks. I think what concern too for me would be is we seem to just keep putting patches on problems. We're patching a problem here. We're not actually solving the root of it. We're just keep patching problems and punting it down the road until it goes away or till another bigger problem comes up. So that would be the two that would concern me the most.
Adrian, I picked up on your comment of livestock business risk management tools, and we just heard from federal and provincial representatives about the importance of continuity and building off of the past. And we've just heard this week announcements of enhancements for the livestock sector to agri-stability. Is continuity and building what you're looking for a livestock risk management tool, or what are your expectations? And Trevor, and now Chris too, jump in as well on livestock, but what are your expectations for the next framework?
Yeah, I think that looking at building on existing programs isn't something that's going to work really well for the livestock industry, because currently there's so little there to support this sector. When I think about some of the programs that have been included in this framework, like, for example, livestock price insurance. Well, that is a producer-funded program that, other than a little bit of administrative costs, that's something that we're footing the bill for as producers. Unlike when I take my cow hat off and put my grain hat on, crop insurance is something heavily subsidized by our federal and provincial governments. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. There is not one ask that I can give that would all of a sudden solve this problem for the livestock industry. And that's what makes it so complicated. But what we can do definitely is make tweaks to things like agri-stability. That the great part of agri-stability, as much as there is frustration with that program, the great part is it is intended to cover all aspects of agriculture. Whether or not it's doing them perfectly is another question, but there are things that we can do within a program like that that can help us. And to be quite honest, as a beef producer, has helped my farm in the past.
Do you have anything to add, Trevor?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was a big proponent for quite a while on production insurance. If you can go to town and insure an acre of wheat, you should be able to go to town and insure a cow. But seeing some proposed changes to ag stability and stuff, I think maybe that could be our program as a backstop. As we're seeing right now in the livestock industry, some good prices. we don't need programs to help us when prices are good. If we can look at a marketing side that keeps us some sustained prices for years, that's also a good place for funding taxpayers' dollars to go to, is marketing, as well as, you know, some changes to ag stability for a backstop, but, you know, when prices are good, we don't need government programs really, so let's keep the prices good.
Oh, I would add to what Trevor's saying as well, is that one of the reasons that stability perhaps didn't work well for the livestock industry in the past was because we had such a very, very long time of really poor prices that there was no downside in our margin because our margin just sucked, right? But now that we're seeing high prices, any livestock producer that's not enrolling in agri-stability and not developing that history of a good reference margin, well, now when prices do come back down, because someday they will, now you're not in a good position in that program to capitalize on it. So something that's worrisome to me for people that aren't utilizing that program.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, I would agree with that, is, you know, some of these programs are so complex and convoluted that they're a nightmare to understand. You know, and I think at any given time, any of us, whether you're grain or livestock, want to understand where you're sitting on any given day, given the conditions. And there's no easy way to figure that out. You know, I think to simplify the language a little bit, you know, advice we're getting is to keep the cows separate from our grain farm, to run a whole separate enterprise from our account, and it shouldn't have to be that way. You know, we're taking, for us, we're adding livestock to help protect our overall state of our farm. And it feels like we're getting punished in some programs because we're trying to protect ourselves. So, you know, I think there's a few things that are almost counterintuitive in some of the programs, and clean up some of the messaging and the how it's understood in the countryside.
Chris, I'll stick with you. The next framework agreement, it's going to take us to 2033. So what future version of Saskatchewan agriculture, outside of the risks and opportunities of today, are you preparing yourself for, and that we need a framework agreement to support us, or to support you through that?
To me, I think Amy said it best when she said, like, we can't necessarily focus on the problems that are looking at us right today. Those are probably going to be there. They're probably going to be different. If you look back 5 years when we'd have been negotiating the last one, I don't think some of the things that we were facing then ended up in the framework. You know, so to me, we need something that, you know, a generational vision for ag. You know, we heard a lot about research. We heard a lot about how long it takes products to get to market. Scott had a presentation on some pretty cool tech. Some of that is probably 7 to 12 years away, but we need to find ways to get that into our hands sooner through a policy framework to help us develop. And, you know, the idea of using some of the traditional SCAP funds to keep us out of an agri-stability or crop insurance position should be the goal. You know, and something as simple as, you know, in my background, there's a lot of talk on research, on-farm research, supporting producers to help coordinate on-farm research to get maybe not scientific results, but results that mean something to their bottom line. Whether you're grain, livestock, it doesn't matter. There's things that we can do to help support producers, to help them learn, adapt, so that they're staying out of some of these programs because they're successful. That would be what my vision of agriculture would look like.
And Adrian, I'll ask you, from looking at the current framework, the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, and this can be open to all three of you, but what are the elements that you most want to protect? What's working very well on your farm?
Yeah, so I would say that of the suite of programs that are out there, I think the one that I would protect the most, this is probably going to be controversial because a lot of you aren't going to agree with me, but honestly, I value agri-stability more than any of the other programs. I think that it is one of the only programs that does a good job of supporting everything that I'm doing on the farm, no matter what commodity I'm growing. And I also think that because we have a long history of being enrolled in the program, we have a very good understanding of how it works. It is part of our budgeting process on the farm every single year to go through what our agri-stability position is. On a best case scenario, what does that agri-stability position mean? On a worst case scenario, what does that agri-stability margin position mean, and how that looks like it will play out. But that didn't come quickly or easily for us. It took a lot of deep diving into that program and learning it inside out, having a lot of sometimes frustrating conversations with the administrators of the program, making sure that they're fully understanding our complex farm setup and needs and numbers. But also that process of learning the position or the program inside and out made us better farmers, because I think anytime you do any kind of deep dives into the financials of your business is a very good thing. So, and I would say another one that I hear a lot that should be the first one on the chopping block is Agri Invest. And that's another program that I love, because I feel like so many of these programs, so much of them are out of our control as farmers, whereas Agri Invest is the one program that is a little bit self-directed. I can decide how much money I can afford to put in or need to take out. It's just a lot of it is left up to us on our individual farm, which I very much appreciate. Also, it costs very little to administer, which I love, and it's easy to navigate as a farmer. So it takes very little of our resources that way.
Trevor, what are you protecting from the SCAP agreement?
So that's basically all your programs.
Programming or priorities?
Yeah, I like programs that help you reach your goals. We've used the water infrastructure programs quite extensively. Seeding down pastures. With the technology coming on the beef side, I think that's going to be huge in the next framework is for adaptation to that. There's some pretty crazy stuff coming. Like I always say, right now we're sitting with the technology in cattle where grain farmers were with a light bar in the 90s. But I don't think it's going to take us 30 years to get where the crop side is in livestock. We're looking at 5 years. We're going to be collecting the same data and managing our land and our cattle about the same way the crop guys are. I think if we're going to be successful, land's going to go up. We got to utilize it to the best of the ability, and I think technology is going to take us to that point. So,
Yeah, I'll say the one that Adrian today is for our farm, it's crop insurance. We've had quite a few good years in a row. So our yields are up, our premiums have come down. So for us, when we're budgeting yields and break evens and stuff like that, crop insurance plays a big part of it. There's definitely tweaks I would love to do to it. But as a whole, it's not totally broke. It just needs to be fixed a little bit. But I would echo what Trevor said in terms of some of the SCAP programs where we've used the old environmental farm plan where we above ground fuel tanks and GPSs and fertilizer storage. We've done grants with the watershed. Like it is a very good program for allowing us to innovate or adapt or whatnot. I'd like it to be a little bit more creative in some ways in terms of not so prescriptive or narrow focused. But as a whole, it's a good program to help us advance if you're willing to do a little bit of paperwork and the matching funds, and the funds are there to make it happen.
I would add that I think that it's important to recognize as a greater agricultural industry, the importance of having a suite of programs. Just because one program may not be applicable or be beneficial to me on the farm doesn't mean it's a program that should be thrown out. I think that it's important that to recognize just the incredible diversity of agriculture in this province. As I sat here today, I was very frequently reminded of how often in this province we hear agriculture, and even those of us in it immediately jump to grain farming. When the reality is there are so many different types of crops and products that we are raising in this province, and there will never be one program that supports every single commodity, every single farm in the exact right way. So it's really important that we have a lot of different programs to choose from that can support our farms in different areas.
We're almost at time, so I'll ask one more question to each of you. We heard a lot today from all sorts of different topics, and some speakers left us with their key recommendation or what they wanted to see in the next framework agreement. Dr. Gray talked about research as a key driver of productivity. Ken recommended maintaining a core margin-based protection program. And Eric talked about encouraging investment through tax policy. What's your key message or key priority or program change that you will be championing for the next framework agreement?
I'll go first, I guess. And then they can just say what he said, hopefully. For me, there's a few things. I think we all know the numbers of how much farmland and businesses need to transition to the next generation in the next 5 to 7 years. To me, that's always been in a box that we've talked about, but we've never actually done anything meaningful about. That's going to be huge. I think the bigger part, we heard lots about investment and technology today. I think the biggest thing for me is we need to get ag back to the forefront of the economy. We're not just an industry, we're an economic driver provincially and federally. We all know the stats of how many jobs are born out of ag or ag business. I think we need to look at ag as a driver of the economy. So let's invest in ag instead of looking at, how much of this piece of the pie are we going to carve up? Let's make the pie bigger. And the benefits will come downstream through, this expression of the best thing to do is put money in a farmer's hand because we'll spend it. We'll invest in the equipment, we'll invest in the animals or the genetics or the research. But we just need to be put to the forefront as a primary economic driver in the country. That's the cause I want to champion, and that's what I think we should be pushing for, is ag at the front, pulling the economic wagon of the country.
Chris, you're wrong. Just kidding. No, of course, I totally agreed with that. I just really wanted to tell you that I didn't agree because you said I was going to. No, and I think that some of the best use, everything that Chris said first, yes, totally agree. Secondary to that, I think that some of the best use of government funding, whether it's provincial, federal, as well as producer checkoff dollars, I think is to make sure that we have a healthy industry so that the suite of business risk management tools that we have don't need to be used. I think that we all can understand right now the fear that there is around trade and exports and the uncertainty around that. And that alone is a huge, huge thing that weighs on farmers' minds. I think that the livestock industry here in Saskatchewan specifically is so determined by a very, very select few of companies that set our fat cattle market prices. That is a giant risk to our industry and something that I have no doubt that will eventually burst this high price bubble that we're currently enjoying. So the more that we can focus on expanding our trade opportunities, the more we can open doors that way, the more our first presenter this morning talked about research, and research is a tricky subject, whether it is government ran or producer driven. But I do believe that research will help us all be incrementally better farmers, which is a good thing. But I think that every single thing that we can do to make our sectors more profitable and less prone to risk in the first place is the best use of our dollars. Not to throw out business risk management tools, though. They are still important. We still need backstops. Farming is a very capital heavy business. And we need to be able to invest that money with a little bit of stability behind it.
Yeah, like Chris and I talked about a while ago, sometimes I wonder if the government's listening, and then sometimes I know they are, because we had a chat at one Zoom meeting about, maybe the government could invest more into marketing our agriculture products. The government changes and they come out with agri marketing right after we just talked about it. And then one other time we talked, well, it was something else we talked about. Oh, the egg stability changes. We talked about the egg stability changes at one of the meetings. 2 weeks later, 2 changes come out. I was like, these guys listening to our Zoom meetings, or are we just on the same page? So sometimes they do listen, maybe. But yeah, to me, I think some of the biggest programs I hope come out of the framework is like food sovereignty for our province and our people. There's so many things we can expand in this province to value add to our products that we grow, like beef, for instance. We don't have enough kill plants to buy beef locally. We don't have enough pork plants to buy pork locally. We're importing lettuce and tomatoes from Arizona when we have one of the largest greenhouses in Saskatchewan growing trees, which blows my mind. We have an AI data center coming to Regina that's going to have lots of waste heat. Why is there not greenhouses on that growing food? If we can grow more food in this province, I think we're better off all along. And I'd like to see some framework or some funding go towards that to get to that point.
I could add one thing. We heard about market diversification a lot today too, and I've said this in other spots before, is, it's a great goal to want to diversify our markets. It's a fantastic goal. But if we can't execute the trade from, Trevor's farm to a port or wherever, it doesn't mean anything. So if we don't use those market diversification dollars with almost a matching investment outside of NPF on supply chain, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So it's a parallel investment, in my opinion, that's very important.
Can I ask for? Okay, can I ask for clarification on that? Do you mean supply chain as far as transportation, like getting product to market?
Yeah, I see Eric. Where's Eric? He's hiding over. Oh, there he is. We talked with yesterday about, investing in rail or port or, those types of things to get our products. I think everybody's working on the same page to try and get it to the end goal. And sometimes we haven't been able to do that. And we've lost customers because of it. So, and some of it's going to take investment.
Well, thank you very much to all three of you. It's great to end the day with perspective directly from the farm. So please join me in thanking our three farmers.